Well, good morning. Welcome to day two, half day of the ILCSWMA 2021 conference. I'm Pete Adrian. Um, just want to say thanks to everybody for yesterday. Uh, we had a great turnout. Everybody seemed to be engaged and enjoy the various topics and sessions. We are going to follow up with some questionnaires, surveys after this to just get a little bit more information from everybody on what they liked, what they would wish to change, and what they're looking for in a future conference. Once again, we are going to be having our conference in 2022 live at the Starved Rock Lodge in Utica. So please mark your calendars, November 3rd and November 4th, 2022. Come on down the day early. Meet us over in the lounge over in the big room, and we'll have a little pre-event meeting, festivities, get together. It'd be nice to see everybody again. Want to just thank our session or our sponsors this year. We did have a few sponsors that are going to transfer over to also be sponsors for next year. So our sponsors were Heritage Environmental Lakeshore Recycling Services, or LRS. We've got Novalex, Swalco, Swank, and Waste Management. So I want to thank all our sponsors. Appreciate your help. It makes this conference a little easier for us to put on and keep some of the little creature comforts that we like to do, and the quality of the program and the location accessible for everybody. So thanks for doing that again. And hopefully everybody gets to work with those folks during the year. Give us a call. So that said, we're going to get going here in just a minute. I'm waiting for James to join us, which he has. So just a couple other housekeeping notes following this session, or this main stage event. On the left-hand side of your navigation, you are going to see the session tab open up as new when the session rooms open. Those will be available a little before they begin, but I ask you to stick around. Those sessions begin at 11 a.m. 10 a.m. And we're going to have the education roundtable that's been going on for years. Anybody that's interested in solid waste recycling education, this is a great opportunity to get together in the room. It'll be very similar to a chat, where everybody can be on screen and talking to one another. So you'll be able to share some ideas and, also talk amongst yourselves about things that you're doing. So you'll set the topics yourself, and probably will use that hour very quickly. Also, James is going to join us in the enforcement roundtable session following. He'll speak a little bit more about that. So without any further ado, I am going to pass it over to James Jennings, once again, manager of the solid waste compliance section of the Illinois EPA. If I got that wrong this time, James, please correct me. Other than that, we will be taking questions in the chat. So put those in, and when he's concluded his remarks, we'll answer some questions through the hour. Okay. Beyond that, James, I'll pass it over to you, and feel free to share those slides that you have when you can bring them up. Haven't gotten those up yet, but we'll get those up as soon as you share them. All right.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Pete. And yes, Pete said, similar to the session that I was in yesterday, I have to do questions at the end because I'm only working off one screen, as the state firewall flagged Hopin is a site we can't use, so I'm having to go off my laptop. But yeah, thanks everyone for jumping on early this morning. The the slides that I've got are going to be available after the session. Something that you'll notice, and I wanted to point out ahead of time, is that these are pretty skeletal. The agency update is very organic at this point in time. There are a lot of updates that are sort of rolling. And so just because something isn't included here doesn't necessarily mean we're not moving forward with it or that it's a different priority. It's just that when authored, this document reflects where we were going with things, and stuff changes over time, even as early as this morning. So did want to touch on some legislative things that the agency has picked up over the last year. This is all tied to bills that the governor signed coming out of spring session. Some of them are things that you may be aware of and may directly impact you. Others, it's just more items to put on your radar. One of the items that we've received some pretty significant feedback from local government on are the pair of bills related to construction and demo debris. As many of you all know, the governor signed a bill that increased state and local fees for clean construction and demolition debris. That had immediate effect. What we contemplate seeing on that is that some of these facilities may end up paying back fees to accommodate changes that they may have had up for their on-site record keeping. We're going to see a similar process for the general construction and demolition debris recycling bill. This was a bill that covered a number of topics related to sites that were previously covered exclusively by Section 2238 of the Environmental Protection Act. For folks who aren't familiar with them, these are construction and demo debris recycling facilities that in many respects mirror transfer sites. And historically, the agency has permitted those almost as if they were transfer stations. This bill had three pretty significant elements. The first is it changed the types of materials that are subject to the landfill tipping fee. The provision of the act that governs solid waste tipping fees was amended to clarify that material from general construction and demolition debris recycling facilities is subject to tipping fees. And so for anybody whose local fees mirror the state fee, in practical terms, what that's going to mean is that you'll likely see an increase in overall revenue this year going forward. A question that we've received on this to this point is how does the agency contemplate handling facilities that weren't assessing the fee at the gate at the time that the bill was signed or even shortly thereafter? And how we plan to go about this is really twofold. First, the bill was effective on the date of signature, meaning that as of mid-July, any material from construction and demo debris recycling facilities that goes to landfills is subject to solid waste fees, whether that fee was paid at the gate or not. In talking with waste industry, that's something that they understand, and they contemplate needing to make some back payments to pick that up. The act actually contemplates an arrangement like this. And so as a result, at least for the first quarter of the state fiscal year, we contemplated exercising enforcement discretion if we evaluate any potential problems with those fees. The same provision of the act contemplates a catch-up payment for facilities that are making static payments over each quarter. And based on discussions internally, we contemplate using that as a mechanism to allow catch-up payments if needed. However, if those payments are not made, thereafter, we would explore our enforcement options because the bill language is pretty clear on what is and what is not subject to fees. In addition to that, it requires the agency to propose to the Illinois Pollution Control Board a rulemaking that will establish operational standards for general construction and demo debris recycling facilities. I'll end up touching on that a little bit later, but we contemplate having that ready to go to the board sometime early next year. And then the third significant element of this is that it will require all of these facilities to be permitted. And that requirement will be woven into the rules. In reality, most of them already are permitted. And so it doesn't change the immediate impact on the existing universe. But for future facilities, it may impact the type of calculus that they'll need to make before entering this regulated environment. It wasn't a calculus they would have had in the past. Some of the other bills that touch the Bureau of Land that may not necessarily impact the counties directly, but that we wanted to identify are the other three that are on here. The coal combustion residuals bill received a lot of media attention, given the pretty significant impact it has on day-to-day life in Illinois. From a Bureau of Land perspective, the overall list ends up being somewhat narrow. These facilities will be permitted by our Bureau of Water, and so it's something that we're not touching day to day. However, all of the financial assurance requirements for these facilities will be evaluated by our team, similar to how we handle landfills and RCRA sites. So absent anything else, or absent any other more aggressive local involvement, we don't necessarily see these types of facilities being woven into our delegated programs. And then we have a couple of product-specific bills that were passed. The Mercury Thermostat Collection Act, which has existed for well over a decade, was set to repeal at the end of last year. That repeal date was extended until January of 2023. In the window between now and then, we're going to be working with the bill sponsors of that to evaluate the best options going forward to see how we should handle these items in the future. One of the concerns that was raised with respect to these products was that absent some sort of statutory backstop to ensure that collections continued, the manufacturer collection program would effectively walk away from Illinois. And there's been a lot of discussion on that, but we were informed by the Thermostat Recycling Corporation, who handles the nationalized manufacturer recycling program, that if this is repealed, that they contemplate revisiting their presence in Illinois and the type of investment that they made here. They've made assertions that they'll continue to offer collections, but their directed outreach and their ad campaigns would change in going forward. So that's something that obviously informs the agency's approach and the types of discussions that we'd be having with legislators about whether to extend this act. And this will likely be something that is addressed in the spring session. And then the last item up is the PFAS Reduction Act. As you can see, it prohibits PFAS using PFAS foam in firefighter training, and then includes a sales and manufacturer ban. This is the first of what will likely be a series of PFAS-oriented bills. As some of you all may be aware, US EPA earlier this week took a pretty strong stance on how they plan to regulate PFAS going forward. And given how we interact with the federal government, it's pretty likely that there would need to be some sort of parallel activity here just to ensure continued compliance with our performance partnership agreement. All right, so in addition to legislative stuff, the other thing that we had change every year is staffing. I'll preface this entire slide by saying that every position that we've had somebody vacate in the last year, we have approval to fill. And so as we sit here today, we're not in a situation where we're worried about retracting as we were about 10 years ago, where we just had positions that went unfilled for years at a time. The process is pretty laborious, as a lot of you all know, and it's going to take some time for some of our backfills to come in. But any changes that you have that you may encounter from people who you've worked with a lot in the agency, those folks are going to be have new people step up. It's just going to be a bit of a process to actually get them in. So we've had several new managers come in the last year. Many of you all may have known that at the end of 2020, John Richardson, who was the field operations section manager, and Todd Marvel, who managed the central region for FOS, both retired. In addition to that, Gino Bruni, who was one of the lead workers in Des Plaines, retired as well. And so many of your delegated county FOS contacts left about this time a year ago. All of those individuals have been backfilled. Paul Eisenbrand, who has worked in Springfield for almost 20 years as a new FOS manager. Tom Rivera is our new Northern Region manager, which covers both Des Plaines and Rockford. And Tom has been out there for a while as well. And then Sunil Suthar is our Central Region Manager. Sunil, as some of you who were involved with the Materials Management Advisory Committee know, Sunil was a permit engineer for a long time with the agency. He then was Waste Reduction Unit Manager for 8 months, and then he was promoted to become FOS Central Region Manager. So Sunil brings a lot of really valuable background to that position, and he started October 1st and is kind of hit the ground running. We also have new managers for all of our remediation programs. So anybody who is doing work with SRP or our leaking underground storage tank programs, in the past year, we've had new section managers there as well. I'm happy to forward their contact information, but I kept this largely focused on the programs that I knew most of the counties were heavily involved with. And then within our group, we'll have a couple of new unit managers coming in tied to promotions and retirements. We're optimistic that those positions will be filled early next year. Again, that's just going to be a function of determining how quickly things get through the hiring process. For background, we recently had somebody come into our group to backfill a compliance position. They started October 1st. And the position was requested in April, posted in May, and interviews occurred in August. So it's normally about a 6 to 7 month window once we make the request. And then others within our group, we had Jessica Miller, who was our primary programmatic electronics recycling project manager over the past 3 years. She left last Friday. She starts with US EPA in Dallas on Monday. Like with the others, her position will be filled probably early next year. In the interim, Becky Jane, who many of you all may have worked with in a variety of other contexts, Becky's volunteered to step up, and she's picking up some of Jessica's day-to-day work, as is Suzanne Boring, who is our other electronics recycling person. And then Hope Wright, who is our subject matter expert for all things RCRA reporting. She's retiring at the end of the year after being with the agency since 1983. She spent the better part of the last 6 months helping cross-train people to make the transition as smooth as possible. And it looks like we'll have somebody be able to immediately step in behind her. One thing I would qualify all this with is that, like many of your all's organizations, as we get closer to the end of the year, the retirement and attrition can ramp up pretty significantly. And to the extent any of that changes, particularly for positions that are directly involved with your day-to-day work, somebody from the agency will be letting you know. And if it's something like with John retiring last year, we'll also coordinate through ILCSWMA through Pete to make sure that nobody is surprised if on January 1st you're all of a sudden working with a entirely new group of people or people who are new to those positions. All right, so now the fun stuff, the programmatic things that we're working on. So yesterday I spent a lot of time talking about the Materials Management Advisory Committee. I'm not going to go back through all of it just because I know many of you all did participate in that session. The primary takeaway that I would encourage people to have from our discussion yesterday and from where the agency is going right now is that we're taking to heart all the recommendations that are included. We're moving forward with the recommendations that could be accomplished without legislation. So anything that's based on creating forms, evaluating program priorities, ensuring that information is publicly available, we're already taking steps to implement those. Things that are tied to either financing or legislation, as you'd expect, going to take a little more time just because there are a lot of externalities that impact our ability to go forward with those. But we've been involved with legislators to address questions that they have about this and provide some insight on how we feel things can move forward effectively. And so I'm again, as we sit here today, I'm optimistic that we'll be able to progress with the suite of recommendations the committee spent a significant amount of time developing last year. Sort of tied into those non-legislative activities. Even with COVID and with everybody working remotely, we have a lot going on, and a lot of it does impact you all. One of the primary things that has changed internally over the last year is the shift of the used tire collection coordination from field operations to our group. When Todd Marvel retired, one of the recommendations that he had was to take a sector-specific approach to how we look at tires. So field operations is still handling all of the information related to tire inspections and on-site tire compliance, but coordinating local collections and then all of the reporting and permitting for those facilities is now currently run through our group. Right now we're in the process of trying to get a position that is concretely dedicated to just that material. But right now for the tire collections and tire program activity overall, your primary points of contact would be a combination of myself, Allison Fry, and Brooke Ferry. If you have any questions about the work on tires overall, feel free to let me know, and then I'll bring everybody else into the fold as needed. Like in previous years, we're very fortunate that our tire collections have ample appropriations to cover the needs of local government. And so if you or your county highway department have begun accumulating used tires that have been fly dumped, absolutely reach out and let us know. We'll work with our contractor and be able to get an event set up in relatively short order. The only limitations on that, as you'd expect, are weather. I know Pete can attest to this directly. We do have to cut off collections at some point in the winter because collecting tires with snow in them is a massive headache. So if you have a facility that has tires on site and you'd like to have them removed, let us know. We'll work with our two contractors to get them taken care of in the next little bit. And if not, absolutely reach out for spring, because we have plenty of money available right now, and we absolutely want to use it for its intended purpose. We also have a lot of collection program expansion to go over. We're very lucky that the Solid Waste Management Fund has amply been appropriated to us to expand many of our collection opportunities. Two that I want to highlight that we're planning to reimagine how we do outreach on them are the Sharps collections and the hazardous educational waste. Becky Jane has been helping coordinate the outreach components of both of these, and Don Buis has also been doing some work on Sharps. And so if you've come across either the two of them in these sectors, they're going to be your subject matter experts, and they'll be in the best position to help you get set up with a collection for either. We were authorized $250,000 for this state fiscal year for hazardous educational waste opportunities. For anybody who hasn't been involved with this program, it's a state required opportunity that we provide school districts and K through 12 schools the opportunity for the agency to fund exclusively collection of curriculum generated hazardous materials. And so if anything from chemistry class materials, art projects and art class materials that are waste, those are things that the agency can collect free of charge and help offset some of the budget concerns that local schools may have had just in general, but particularly from COVID. Like with our tire collections, the process for this is pretty straightforward. Reach out to myself or Becky to make a request for a pickup. We'll talk through with you what you have on site, confirm it's collectible material, and if it is, we'll send our contractor out and they'll take care of it for you. The Sharps collections have a somewhat similar setup, but I'll qualify this with a note that the nature of our existing contract has complicated a bit how at least this is handled in part of our states. As a general principle, any site that is currently working with the agency as part of our medication take-back program can be set up with a Sharps collection container that will then be, once filled, be pulled free of charge or be sent back free of charge to one of our contractors. In addition to that, sites that are not part of the medication take-back program can request a sharps collection that we pay for by submitting an application to us using the medication take-back form on our website. And then just as part of the transmittal, indicate that the only material that you want collected is sharps. And then just because that allows us to illustrate to our contractor what the expectations are on site. Once you have a bin on site, you also have some other options from that are available from us. The agency has been working with Department of Public Health to buy off of their master contract to procure containers that members of the public can take home, fill on their own, and then bring back to the collection site so that nobody is having to handle loose needles. Like with the Hazardous Educational Waste Program and the Sharps program participation, in order to get some of these, all you have to do is ask. We just moved a pallet of them onto our floor on Wednesday. And so I can tell you definitively that we have lots of them available. So to make an ask, just send either me or Don Buis an email, and then we'll work with our staff to get them sent your way. As I said, though, there have been some complications with the Sharps collection program. The contract that we have for this medication take back is effectively split within the state, and there's a semi-firm dividing line of I-72 as to who services which collection locations. The collections served north of I-72 will be working with the Heritage Office out of Lombard. They're in the process of developing some SOPs to send out to our collection partners, highlighting the process to ensure that there's no gap in coverage for when Sharps containers are available. And also to help ensure that there's no concerns about the expediency at which containers are made available in the first place. At the outset of this fiscal year, there were some delays in getting bins out. In speaking with Heritage, there were a number of reasons for that, and we're optimistic that we've addressed those. But like with any program where you all interact with us, if you've made a request to them and it's been unfulfilled, or if there's problems in general, let us know. This is going to be a continually evolving process, and it helps us evaluate how we bid our next contract out for this and for our other collection programs. Got a couple of other established program updates. Some of you all may have seen that earlier this month, the agency executed an intergovernmental agreement with Madison County, expanding our HHW collection program to include the Metro East area. Beginning a week from next Friday, Madison County will open that facility to the public. Their collection opportunities, at least at the outset, are a little narrower than what we've seen historically at our 4 sites in Northern Illinois. But in speaking with their site operator, it sounds like that's something that they're going to be open to expanding once they have a good sense of what the level of local engagement is. The process to actually get them online took 3 years. This is one of the few things that was actually not slowed by COVID. We were able to continue moving with that, how we would have had everybody been working normally for all of 2020. And part of the reason I say that is that we have received requests from other local governments for a tutorial on how Madison County got online and what may be needed for others. We're happy to have those conversations with anybody. It is a process. It can take a long time, but as Walt Willis has pointed out numerous times, the long-term facilities are more programmatically efficient than one-day events. And so we're open, provided we have the funding available, we're absolutely open to expanding that universe because it does provide some programmatic certainty that the one-day events don't necessarily. We've also made a couple of operational changes to how we go forward with our HHW one-day events. Last year, we worked with 8 local governments to identify areas of the state that could be serviced on a rolling basis, effectively having a one-day event every year. And this is the first state fiscal year where we have actually attempted to ensure that those are available. Once we have that list finalized and we've had an entire year of collections to confirm ability to participate, we'll end up putting that on our website. we're then going to, beginning next state fiscal year, take a more structured approach to our one-day HHW events. As many of you all know, in the past, there have been some delays in being able to respond to one-day applications, and at times those delays have been pretty significant. And that's been tied to a combination of the state budget impasse, some limitations on financing for these events, as well as a variety of other programmatic factors that have pulled resources in other directions. To help ensure, though, that there's a structured approach to this, and that things are able to continue with some reasonable expectations, both on the agency and on the collection partners, we're contemplating adopting agency rules that will outline the application process and ensure that things have a degree of more perpetual inertia than what we've seen in the past. I'll touch on the rules a little bit later, but agency rules, just as a general matter, are easier to adopt and take less time than pollution control board rules. And so once we're given the green light to go forward on those, we'll have a copy of them available for public comment, and those should be able to be adopted well before the end of this state fiscal year. And then we'll have a couple of other rulemaking items as well. The bill that changed many of the C&D facility obligations included some requirements on the agency to develop forms for the facilities to submit data quarterly. Those forms are available on our website and will actually be included as part of a redesigned C&D specific website. Right now, they're included on our CCDD page for convenience while the other is under construction. Once the C&D facility rules are ready, we'll do outreach on those as well, like we would for any other rulemaking. And then last up, some of you all are involved with our recycling, our electronics recycling task force. This was a group that was statutorily required to be constructed when the Consumer Electronics Recycling Act was passed in 2016. For several reasons, it hadn't materialized until about a year ago, and they're now meeting quarterly. Jessica Miller and Sunil Suthar were the agency's primary representatives on that task force. Clearly, they won't be going forward. And so for the November meeting, Dave Van Vorn and I will be leading the meeting. And then we're going to have both Becky and Suzanne from our team serving as agency contacts as well. With Dave retiring at the end of the year, we will need another somebody to fill his seat. And we'll be reaching out to some candidates who've expressed some interest on that to gauge whether that interest still exists. But the group is tasked with developing best management practices for collection sites. Once those are developed and as they evolve over time, we'll circulate those certainly to ILCSWMA, given how many counties are serving as collection sites, and they'll be on our website so that there's a broader understanding of what these expectations are, how those expectations were realized, and it'll provide hopefully a good template for additional counties to join the statewide manufacturer-funded program. All right, and then last up, just a couple of rule updates. I've touched on the C&D rules. Our objective is to do outreach on those later this fall, early winter. For some background, the internal draft is in its final stage of review, so those could come out as early as next month for comment. Our objective in developing these was to be as faithful to the statutory framework as possible, be as clear about the operating obligations as we can, and be relatively minimally invasive to existing permitted facilities so that we're not upsetting an entire permitted universe just by regulatory fiat. State law requires us to file that with the Pollution Control Board by July of next year. For some temporal context, once that's filed, the board does have some flexibility as to when they could actually take it up for hearing, although they do have a 1-year backstop by which they would have to move forward with rules. So the most likely outcome would be that these rules are adopted sometime in early 2023, with some of the annual obligations taking functional effect in 2024. Those rules, though, do not change any of the statutorily required obligations that are set forth in the revised version of 2238. And so to the extent that facilities are now regulated slightly differently than they were a year and a half, 2 years ago, that's the current reality. There's no reason to wait on the rules to proceed with enforcing any of those changes, because that bill was effective on the date it was signed. I touched on the IHHW one-day event rules. Again, we're hoping to have those selection criteria ready for circulation later this year. And then we have 2 other sets of rules that have been under development for a while. And despite my typo at the bottom, those are likely going to come through in spring of 2023. One is our comprehensive overhaul of compost facility rules. Here, the objective is to create some regulatory flexibility for compost sites to open up the doors to potential new involvement, and to expand the types of materials that could be accepted at compost facilities, so that we're not necessarily burdened by the 10% additive rates that have historically existed. Then recycling grant rules, very similar to the HHW one-day event rules. These would just establish the criteria needed to apply for and be eligible for recycling grants. These would be agency rules as opposed to Pollution Control Board rules. And so one of the benefits of that is that the timing element is much narrower. Once the rules are proposed, they can take effect in as little as 120 days. So like with the HHW rules, once we have a document ready to share for outreach, that'll be circulated. We'll absorb as many of the comments as we can in a consistent manner, and then thereafter we'd file and hopefully have something ready to go for fiscal year 2023. So there's my contact information for those who don't have it. At the conclusion of this, I'm going to send this to Pete so that he can circulate as well. But now, I'm sure you all have heard enough from me, and I know I definitely have. I'm going to close this out so I can take any questions that you all have.
All right. So please drop anything you have in the chat. Do have one for you there, James.
That's a really good question. So when Ellen retired in 2018, some of the work that she did was spread amongst a number of program areas, and there's some administrative reasons for that, job duty reasons, but this also highlights some of the attrition that that wasn't included on the last sheet. The budgeting and invoicing is handled by the accountants within our group. We hit sort of an apocalypse scenario where we had 3 accountants who were doing this across the state. And on June 30th, one retired, one moved on a short notice for family reasons, and the other was promoted. And so right now, the budgeting and invoicing, any questions that you have on that, direct those to me. We had the person who was promoted is still helping out a little bit, but rather than saying, yeah, please reach out to her, I don't want to overburden her in her new position within our group. So those positions have actually already been posted. Interviews are set to take place in November. And once we have those candidates in house, we'll forward their names to everybody so you know who your new budgeting contact is. For planning, right now, we have a position ready to post that'll cover some of that stuff Ellen did specifically. That work had been picked up by a combination of myself and Yacano Foxworth, who's our compliance unit manager. The frontline employee for that will hopefully be in-house sometime early next year. But at this point in time, anything that you need, feel free to route it through me, and then I can farm it out to make sure that you get a response in pretty short order.
So I have a question, James, going back to tires. The end markets for tires seem to be a bit, I don't know, lacking. Is there anything that the state can do to try to find better things? I mean, maybe you can explain, if you can, with sort of the course, these tires that are being collected by these 2 contractors, they end up at a grinder. And then ultimately, I think they used to go to tire-derived fuel, but my understanding is there's little or none of that going on anymore.
So yeah, so that's one of the things that's evolved a little bit over the last year. So we had a lot of them were going to tire-derived fuel. There were some other maybe smaller scale projects that could pick them up for like things like playground and athletic field surfacing. But right now, the markets aren't good, and the agency has the authority to issue market development grants. We're currently working with a multi-state group to evaluate if there's a good collective approach that we could take so that you're not having 50 different approaches to statewide market development. So right now it's in a little bit of a holding pattern pending some resolution on that front. We're ideally long-term, what we'd like to do is mirror the approach that Colorado is taking, which is some effective public and private partnerships with the possibility of public financing. And they've had some very positive outcomes to some projects they've done over time. But I mean, there's a lot of hurdles to be able to get to that point. And we're just hoping that provided the money is available, we can emulate some of what they're doing. But yeah, right now it's similar to some of these other commodities. The markets for tire-derived material aren't great, and there's not a profound demand for more, even though tires continue to come out of use.
So just to clarify, my understanding is that probably most of our tires are ending up in other states, possibly used as alternative daily cover at a landfill.
Anecdotally, it appears that a lot of our tires are going to Indiana for use as ADC. Yeah.
And yet we don't use ADC. We don't have that as an option in Illinois. Is that correct?
They can be chipped down to a certain size, but it's not as profound as what we're seeing there.
Not as economically. I mean, there's obviously a cost all the way through here. And so, okay. Well, I hope we get some improvements on that in the future. I mean, we're not going to see a lack of tires, and I'm glad the fund is available to, at least get them off the roads and ditches and provide some amnesty to our local authorities that collect these things, on behalf of the public. I do have a good question here. I'm going to read this one. So people that may not have audio or video. So this was from Sarah. Are all the containers for med takebacks and sharps becoming more secure than the open top drums? When I pursued the program services, the county sheriff's department was against it because they felt the containers were unsafe and too dangerous if someone intended to steal prescription meds. So I think this is a good question. I know it goes from sharps to meds, but maybe you can address that.
So the short answer is that, yeah, we're working with Heritage to identify the best type of container that we can use. One of the nice conveniences of the contract that we have with them is that it's not so prescriptive that it dictates the specific type of container that has to be used. So we're working with them to address that. But yeah, it's an ongoing process because of the number of sites that we're working with, and because they've noted some labor shortages at various points. But yeah, help is on the way. It's just it's at a very deliberate pace, I guess, is the nicest way to say it.
Yeah. Okay. I had a question also about HHW. So, in other parts of the country, there are a lot of reuse swap kind of opportunities that piggyback these programs or may be in lieu of an HHW. I mean, is there any way to see if the state would fund something like that through a grant, possibly to allow the development of a operation or a facility that would do a reuse of some of these materials before they would have, ultimately go off for whatever they're going to, through our vendors like Heritage?
Yeah. So I think that there's maybe a couple of answers to that. I mean, the framing device I use in the presentation for recycling grants is probably imprecise. I mean, because that contemplates it has the connotation of being just curbside materials. For a grant program that we want to run, it would be driven by materials management principles as opposed to just conventional recycling concepts. And so, yeah, a site like that would be a good candidate for that type of award because it does meaningfully impact what goes to landfills, and has a larger impact on just the environmental programs that we have as a whole. So yeah, that'd be the type of site that would be available for funding through how we imagine the grant program would work. In the short term, I mean, we'd have to have some discussions internally about how some of our HHW money is used. It's conceivable that if there was an excess because of how it's appropriated, we could actually step through the process of maybe using some HHW money if it's not spent towards something like that. There's some details that we need to iron out, both with respect to the type of site that we'd be looking at, but also the financial logistics of ensuring we're able to actually use the money from the correct lines. But just off the top of my head, there are a couple of avenues that we'd be able to probably pursue financing a project like that.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen is, good quality unopened, if it looks anything like it's been tampered with or opened, it would go, over to the HHW side. But if it was clearly unopened and, packaging wasn't disrupted, then it could go into a reuse aspect where people could come in and possibly take it, or it could go to some other agencies too. That would be another thing, is the transfer. So I don't know all the legal aspects of that for Illinois as far as allowing that to happen, but it seems to work in some other states. So I was interested.
Yeah, and we have some that pop up around the state. And one of the nice things about an establishment like that is that, like other things, operated properly, it does not require a solid waste permit. Right. And so that insulates the type of award we'd be able to give in a pretty meaningful way, as opposed to if we were to provide seed money for an HHW facility. That gets a little more complicated because of the nature of our regulatory authority.
Yeah, I mean, well, you see like Habitat for Humanity, restores, they're dealing with some hazardous materials that they're getting donated from other, entities and people dropping off sometimes. So I would think it would be kind of, local zoning, and that probably would be enough. But yeah, so was a nice thank you here. Just put that up. So been hearing a few of these from yesterday, and that's great. So thanks again for the MMAC, and all those that worked on it over that long period of time. It's tedious, but it was good work. So I think it will be impactful in the years to come here for the state of Illinois. I did want to move to a little bit of a discussion about electronics also. So you mentioned these quarterly meetings that are starting to happen, and Dave Van Voorn's chairing. So, buddy, get in Dave's ear. But I mean, there was some talk about possibly, seeing if there's some things that need to be changed. And I think, running an electronics collection program, certainly we see a lot of things that are outside of the CED definition. We're going to have a session here in the next hour talking about solar panels. And I know there's some talk about increasing recovery and, possibly even some ban on solar panels in our landfills in the state of Illinois in the future, like CRTs. I don't know if how that was going to go along. I mean, do you see room for CERA to cover something like that, or do you feel that we may have to look at some additional legislation for some of the commercial materials?
So, when you say that, are you asking for commercial materials that would currently be covered by CERA if they were household materials, or commercial materials as in the solar panels? Because I think that
that's both. Good point. I mean, I guess CERA is only residential, whereas we are, seeing commercial materials still coming through. And yeah, I guess if it was residential, because there certainly are panels coming off of homes, or will be coming off of homes in the future. So I don't know how you want to.
So the approach that we've taken in some of these discussions for multiple products has been that, well, I mean, we're open to pursuing product stewardship programs for any number of items, provided that we have a framework that's workable within Illinois. I mean, SIRA has some administrative headaches. I mean, every bill is imperfect, but it seems to overall accomplish a lot of the things that we need for a bill like that. So if we were to expand that into other products like solar panels or like pharmaceuticals was examined over the rolling part of the last 3 years, we'd be open to that type of program. And it seems like that's going to be the coming trend nationally. But absent some maybe independent financing language, it'd probably be hard to weave solar panels into SIRA because bootstrapping them off the top could create a situation where you have electronics manufacturers and having to finance the recovery of solar panels. And those are sufficiently different that could be create enough friction to impair both types of programs. One approach that we considered and that was discussed pre-COVID was a omnibus approach to product stewardship in the state, where there was a statewide statutory framework that outlined the minimum requirements for a product stewardship program in Illinois, and then would have the amendments to that just be to amend the list of products, and then from there, the agency or the Pollution Control Board would be tasked with crafting the rules governing how those are handled. The nice thing about that is that it allows you to be a little more specific about how individual collections are handled, who is responsible for what, and you have the benefit of a administrative record, including filings, transcripts to go back on. So there's never any questions about whether something was discussed as part of the process to develop it. So that's one thing that was kicked around to enable us to weave in as many of these new products as possible in a relatively efficient manner. But that was pre-COVID. A lot of things have changed since then. But to circle back, yeah, the answer is we'd be open to those type of programs. They're just the devil's in the details.
So here from our illustrious chair of the task force, Dave, I know you're not the key guy, but yeah. So I guess that's where we have to be, is that I don't know about the eagerness of the manufacturers there, Dave. I think we'll have a guest from ERI talking about their solar panels, so maybe they can share that information about how the manufacturers are managing it in some of the other states that have these mandates already in place. So that could be interesting. I'll switch over to Marlon. Brought up something here about the batteries. So maybe we could talk a little bit about proper disposal of damaged lithium batteries, and just in general, any of the electronics that are showing up anywhere for that matter, at MRFs, at electronic recycling, C&D facilities. What can we do about the challenges of managing this material?
Yeah, no, and this is the ultimate example of something that absolutely nobody wants. US EPA is struggling with this as well, because there are concerns about the inability to nationalize something that is an inherently national problem. At this point in time, I mean, our recommendation for these type of materials is handling and disposal of hazardous waste. Over the long haul, we could see a situation where you would need to have some sort of legislative approach to ensuring safe end-of-life handling, so that's not falling on either consumers or potentially having catastrophic effects at MRFs or landfills because of well-intentioned but mistaken end-of-life handling practices. At this point, I mean, our advice on handling anything lithium ion is, to the extent that it can be separated, take it to somebody who is qualified to do so, and then have the batteries handled as hazardous materials, because they create too many issues to justify some of the alternative approaches that might be available.
So one thing, we've got the Call to Recycle, RBRC, Rechargeable Battery Recycling Corporation, and they have some partnerships. We see Home Depots and Lowe's and some of the other retailers that use their box, but I think some of the challenges we found is that if we local governments want to do it, we're faced with some costs. Again, you said HHW. Could we get a type of RBRC program tied into the heritage or the the IEPA's HHW program without, sort of like we're doing with Sharps now, where these boxes might be funded through, state funding versus local funding?
So it's a qualified yes. There is a pathway to go that route. Right now, existing state law would probably require some of those sites to have to be permitted, which is counterintuitive, and it's a function of how narrowly Section 2255 of the Act is written. So a relatively concise tweak to that provision could allow for that. But right now, unless you have a permitted facility, the on-site collections can create unnecessary headaches. But yeah, I mean, that'd be a good long-term option, especially given some of the financing that we have available for HHW.
Yeah, because again, RBRC, they'll say, okay, if it's just lithium batteries, the box, there's no cost. But if you're going to have mixed batteries in it, then there's always cost involved. And the reality is there's mixed batteries. You're going to get those alkalins, and they're going to want to charge that fee because that's how they're funding their program. So, the offset, we probably don't see many people using the boxes because of that cost. And if there was a chance to, get more of those out into the public space, that would, I think, enhance a lot of options for, diversion of, where they're headed. So, but it's definitely, like you said, it's a tricky one. US EPA's challenge with it too. So, well, I don't know if we have any other questions. Please post them now. We've got just a few minutes left. I did get this one. Dave Van Voren just said, correct. The manufacturers for e-waste and solar panels is different for the most part. So yeah, we're gonna have to, kind of work through that discovery, as well as all these panel manufacturers, whether they're offshore or domestic, which appears to be the more domestic is coming online here very quickly. I mean, Illinois is going to be a solar state. We'll hear that next. After the breakout. So yeah, we're going to move to the next session. James, you need to hop into the other side. So I'm going to take you offline and let you do that. So just a reminder, everybody, this session will end here. We're going to have, the session room should be open now. Education or enforcement, you're welcome to hop in, either one of them or both. And then we're going to wrap that up in the hour. And then we'll come back to the main stage here, and we'll have our final presentation on solar, diverting CO2, and the disposition of used solar panels through recycling. So hope you can stick around and join us for all of that. Once again, thanks everybody, and we will see you soon. So again, session button off to the right. Click on that, pick a session, and we'll see you there. All right, bye-bye.